Okay, so we do have somebody new. Generally in the morning meeting here, the Sunday meeting, we do a little meditation and for 10 minutes. So it's not a grueling Zen sit. You're not going to be sweating bullets and stuff waiting for me to ring the gong. Just 10 minutes, but it's enough to get a taste. Do you have a meditation practice, Laura? Okay, so you're welcome to do that. Whatever practice you do, and that goes for everybody. I mean, not necessarily a vocal mantra practice or something like you do silent mantra. But just briefly, at the center we teach 4 disciplines of mystical practice. So there's meditation, morality, inquiry, and devotion. And these are each categories that you can find in all of the mystical traditions, and they all kind of work together. So meditation is primarily a method of training our attention, because our attention is captivated by our thoughts. And the thoughts are, thoughts about the world, thoughts about, what am I going to do today? And most importantly, from a mystical perspective, they're thoughts about me. And the problem with thoughts about me, if we believe them, is that that's the foundation of our story, our delusion of being separate. So what the mystics of all the traditions say is that we're not separate. And our suffering comes from taking ourselves to be separate. What in the Hindu tradition they say is the I am the body idea, or the knot between spirit and matter. So these are, of course, metaphors, but the I am the body idea. We take ourselves to be this, flesh puppet. And then when things happen to it, we suffer. And when we start contemplating our mortal demise, we suffer greatly. So if we want to be free of suffering, then we have to realize something about what we are. And the first thing we have to do in order to have an opportunity to realize that is to pull our attention, or to learn to let go of the thoughts about me. The problem is that they're very captivating, and we have a lot of emotion tied in with these thoughts. And the whole world also pretty much agrees that yes, you are you, and you got this driver's license, it's got your picture and your name on it, and that's your identity. And so the story is it's a very dense thicket of thorns to penetrate and get beyond. So meditation is really important, or some method of training attention. So at the center, we like to, Joel's great gift, and my feeling is that he has this ability to see the overview. And so he often says he's the overview guy. And so he's been able to kind of look at all of these traditions and see what are the main principles, what are the main themes. And then from there, we can individually choose, well, let's say, for me, meditation, a lot of my meditative practice was in Taoist Qigong and Tai Chi practice. But that's something that only attracts a certain number of people. There was a Buddhist master, Shantideva. He wrote the Bodhisattva's Guide to the Way of Life, or the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or something. Yeah, the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Guide to the Way of the Bodhisattva, something like that. Very famous Buddhist in Tibet. And he had a very difficult time when he was a beginner learning to meditate. He tried his breath, and he tried mantra, and he tried probably meditating on the thangka, the mandala or image of a teacher and that kind of thing. Nothing worked. He couldn't settle his mind, couldn't find any kind of stability with his attention, until finally he got a horn of a yak, and that he could meditate on. So the point here is that we each need to find what works for ourselves. It's not about thou shalt, this is the only way kind of thing. But the principle is we need to stabilize our attention. So however that works for you. We generally here recommend starting with breath meditation, and the reason for that is that there's no theological baggage. You pretty much, everybody recognizes that they breathe, and it's always with us. So if we're in the shopping mall waiting in a long line, or we're waiting at the dentist's office or something, it's always available, even at a stoplight. If you're getting a little aggravated because the guy is tailgating you, you can just sit at the stoplight, follow your breath, stabilize your attention a little bit, let go of those thoughts of the bodily harm you wish you could do to the aggressive driver, and so forth. And then you have a little bit more freedom, a little less suffering. So that's the bottom, the sort of the general intro to why we meditate. Then the other, just briefly, the other three practices that we teach here. Inquiry. Inquiry is about the question of what is real. Who am I? And so it's the kind of the foundation of that philosophical hunger for knowledge, but it also takes us back to our true nature. So if we're not interested in who I am or who you are, if that's not calling your attention, then it's very difficult to actually find it. It's like you have to first be kind of curious. Wow, okay, yeah, there is this mystery. Wow, what's really going on here? So inquiry is that direction. Morality is this practices of selfless love and compassion. How do we find out what we're doing that is contra to the reality? Because the reality is selflessness. The reality is oneness, or not two-ness. Of course, as soon as you start putting a label on it, the truth is really non-dual. The truth is beyond distinctions. As soon as we start labeling it, saying it's one, then we have to say, well, it's not one, but it's not two either. Because we start falling into that trap of the mind's labels being creating distinctions. So, the mystics have lots of ways around this, but ultimately they all say, well, you can't actually put it into words. Because if you try to put it into words, you're making a distinction. So morality is about recognizing our habits that are based on this story of I and the selfishness and aversion that comes out of that. We want happiness. We want to avoid suffering. We want to get what we want. We want to avoid what we don't want. And because of that, in our interactions with others, we often come from a place that is not in harmony with the greater good. And so by recognizing those habits, we begin to free ourselves from that, really a destructive delusion, because it's not taking us to happiness. Happiness isn't going to be found by avoiding and getting. And that's really what we have to come to grips with. On the path, we have to really recognize that this isn't happiness isn't going to be something that I get from obtaining or from avoiding. Like all of the other things in life, if I work hard, I can earn enough money, I can get the, that bitchin' Camaro or whatever that I've been desiring since I was 17, or that kind of thing. But you get the car, and a year or two goes by, and what's the next thing? So it's not lasting. The satisfaction isn't lasting. We want lasting satisfaction. So morality is one way that we work with that. We have precepts. I think they're posted up there on the back wall. If you haven't seen our precepts, they're worth looking at. And in the practitioners groups, we recite those daily as a way of helping to remind ourselves during the day to look for those opportunities to let go of that self-centered conditioning. And then the fourth practice is devotion, and that has to do with love for the divine. Love for it doesn't even have to be an image, but traditionally in a lot of the traditions they would have different kinds of personifications of divine attributes. So Mother Mary, being the personification of compassion, and the Mother of God, and this quality. And Guanyin is very similar. In some of the traditions they have these wrathful representations of the divine. But the point is, it's about an intimate experience within your own heart that you come into contact with love that is beyond any worldly relationship, and then that awakens a faith within you that there's something greater, And then that love is like a little beacon, and you love that love. You know, that is your road home, and so you become devoted to it. And the more the devotion, the greater the love, and pretty soon it consumes everything, and all you want is that experience, because it's a bliss beyond what you can normally have in any other human realm. So that's where it goes, and then eventually, of course, the devoted object and the devotee have to merge in the end, because ultimately there isn't a separation there. So we work with some of those kinds of practices too. And again, it's different people, different proclivity. Some people need to meditate on a horn of a yak. Some people need to do 100,000 prostrations to Guru Rinpoche. But what is the principle of the practice? And we're here to support people's personal practices. So those are the main things we do here. I just thought, since it's kind of the beginning of the year, I'd go over the four practices that we work with. Of course, any kind of activity can become a meditative activity. So, for instance, my wife Hiromi, if you don't know who she is, she recently started studying watercolor painting. And you can take that same mindfulness to watercolor painting, you know, and watch your mind, and especially watch the critical mind come up and say, oh, I'm never going to be good at this. Oh, that's interesting. I'm just painting here, you know, like that. The story comes up about, oh, this is just like when you were 4 and you know couldn't tie your shoes or whatever. Again, it gives us an opportunity to see the story of I, to let it go and be present with this moment. So that's what we're going to do for the next 10 minutes. And posture is useful. We want an upright, relaxed posture so that everything, the organs can do their job, the breath can do its job, that you don't feel collapsed and you don't feel too tense. Upright through the crown of the head, relaxed through the seat and the feet. Find a place to put your hands on your knees or in your lap where you can just rest them. And then recommend you keep the eyes at least partly open. You can rest the gaze, you know, traditionally they say like 3 meters away or something like that. But find a point where you can put the gaze and just kind of let it lay there like you're putting your hands on your knees. Here we go. So this little bow we do is to show respect to all of the teachers and those that have passed on these methods, this spiritual technology, this sacred sciences that we can use for our own benefit. One other thing about meditation is that we begin with in our curriculum here at the center, we begin with a concentration practice, but we then develop into what we call choiceless awareness, which is similar to Vipassana. It's a Vipassana style practice, where we're attending to consciousness and its forms directly, not necessarily focusing on just one object within consciousness. And then from that perspective, we're able to do lots of different kinds of sub-practices, so to speak. But much of this is outlined in Joel's book, The Way of Selflessness. So if you're curious, next time there's a library day, and if you haven't seen that or looked through that book, I recommend it. Okay. Yes?
I'd just like to say that what you said this morning about meditation and everything you went through, I heard it through new ears. And that always happens to me when I get in here. Actually, it's happening to me a lot now. same thing over and over again. It isn't the same thing over and over again. And I just want to thank you for how much detail, and not even detail, but the places that you went to that don't seem that I've normally heard in the description that you did this morning. I want to really thank you because it seemed really, really thoughtful and mindful, like it was coming straight from how you do it and how you see it. And so thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I mean, I think it's true that we benefit from hearing the same truth over and over again. I mean, essentially that's what we do here on Sundays, is, it's the good news, but it's, like you said, not necessarily that we can hear it. And so I think part of doing our own practice is to where we can actually really let that come in. And it's not necessarily the words, so to speak, as it is there's a quality of what is it like to really feel free, What is it like to be at peace? And it's possible.
That's what I felt.
Yeah.
I felt that you shared that, and I felt that that's how you attained your freedom.
Practice is important, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the discipline of practice?
Sure. What do you mean by discipline?
Well, for instance, it doesn't take much to distract me from sitting.
Uh-huh.
And it's probably been my biggest challenge, is to just get myself to sit.
Get yourself to sit there, sit down, yeah. So, in one way is you're not going to be able to make yourself sit there, right? And one level of one aspect of my answer is you can't really do that. What you can do is you can keep paying attention and keep trying, and then if you're like me, you'll get to a point where you have no choice. Right? You realize that this is the only thing left that you can do that might get you happy, right? And so I think the trick there is it still starts with paying attention. So it's still a kind of practice, just to notice as you go through your daily life how the little annoyances, the little things you want to be different, cause you so much suffering, right? I mean, and how something you have no control over, what somebody else is doing or saying, maybe somebody maybe somebody you see on the news, doesn't matter. You still have no control over what other people are doing. And if you put your happiness on that, or what your body's doing, let's say maybe you have an illness. Like my kids, both of them, it's like, first my son got sick and then I got it. And then I started getting better and then my daughter got sick and then I got it. And so it's like all month I've been, like this morning I woke up, oh man, I gotta go talk at the center. I feel like laying here. Right? But it's so that process of seeing that getting what I want and avoiding what I don't want isn't making me happy. So what's the alternative? It's to learn to really see how my mind works. And the way that we learn to see how our mind works is by getting rid of the extraneous and being just with our mind. That's what we call meditation. And there's, of course, different props we can have. We can get our cushions. We can learn to get into certain kinds of postures that help connect inside the channels in the body so that the mind is more easily stabilized. People can practice yoga as sort of preliminary for this. There's lots of different methods. But the point really is that we're learning to pay attention to the movements of the mind, because they're what's causing our they're part of the distraction that allows our delusion to maintain. If the movements of the mind subside and awareness is present, so the movements of the mind subside every night in deep sleep, right? We all have the experience of going to sleep. There's no thought, timeless, no memory from this time, and then we wake up. But we still have the sense that we were there, that our being wasn't truncated. So, and it was restful. We like sleep. It's important. We need it. And there's something really true there in that. So what would happen if we could become aware when there's no content like that? Well, this is the point of practice, really, is to become stable enough in our attention that we can recognize the ground that's always here, that essentially is where we go in deep sleep, but we're unconscious is the problem. And that's how Joel woke up, right? As he was falling asleep. And he saw the clear light. And he woke up from that falling asleep, and everything was the clear light. And that was the end of Joel, actually. So, discipline, we take it as, the next thing is it's one of our precepts. Responsibility is our first precept. Self-discipline is our second. And what the precept says is to recognize that all moments, all events are opportunities for spiritual practice. So, the second part of this is it's not just about sitting down. Sitting down and doing meditation is the training wheels. That's what we do to begin to recognize the mind. But then the actual practice, where the rubber meets the road, is during life. And then, so discipline has a big part of discipline is not just, it's not just on Sunday. Oh yeah, I go to the center on Sunday, I hear these lofty non-dual ideals, and then I, go back to my chicken fights and my mafiosa connections on Monday. You know what I mean? That's not the way to freedom, right? So whatever it is, we want to recognize that this is an opportunity for practice also. Whatever's happening. If it's you're falling asleep, you're in a dream, you wake up in a dream, you realize, oh, I'm dreaming. Oh, good time to practice. So there's an orientation shift from spiritual practice is something I do in a certain room, in a certain cushion, to you become a seeker, you become a practitioner, everything you're doing is your practice. Everything is. And so that's, in one sense, that's a step forward. But then, of course, you have an identity as a seeker, right? And so that's still an identity that's separate. But it's an identity, as Joel says, that self-destructs ultimately. Because if you keep looking, eventually there will be some things seen. That self that is appearing and disappearing is a projection. It's a thought. Everything is. The world, everything is our experience of it. You can't actually tease apart. So that's what the goal is, going to this experience of unity, this experience of, well, it's not even unity because there still arises many different things, but you recognize that they're all manifestations of the same thing. Just like in a dream, the dream is always a manifestation of the dreamer. You can't, when you start analyzing a dream, you don't say, oh, you don't start believing that the figures in your dream were other beings that were coming into your dream. I mean, who knows, maybe, sometimes you have dreams where it seems like there are other beings coming into your dream, but, generally speaking, those are aspects of your own awareness, right? And so that's where we're going with this. But we have to start by breaking attention, the tendency of attention to latch onto those stories about me, and to relax and see some of the more context, from that fixation on content to more of what's really going on all the time. And it's a relaxing, but it comes from having to, you have to make enough effort to break that habit. So, yeah.
I've been attending Todd's practice group this year, And toward the beginning, I think we've only met a couple times, but he made a point that really helped me with regard to, I think it's Catherine's question. Yeah. He says, sit, especially when you don't want to. This idea that, that really sharpens the efficacy of the practice. And I know Joel's kind of made that point too, and the Tibetans say if you can meditate in your dreams, you get however many times the benefit and so forth. So that really inspired me, and so anybody who's having trouble with the regularity of their practice, remember it's bonus points if you do it when you really don't want to.
Yes, I think that's really good advice. Sit, especially when you don't want to. And then I would expand that and sit, especially when you're suffering. Especially, generally when we're suffering, we want to distract ourselves. That's the standard approach, right? You hear some really bad news. Maybe first you can't do anything, you cry, and then the next thing is, where's the ice cream, or what's on TV, or let's go for a drive, or just something to distract the mind, take my attention away from my suffering. But that really is the best time to practice, to go into the feeling, because suffering is a sign. Suffering is a sign that you're clinging. Buddha said that suffering, or dukkha, it really means more like the unsatisfactoriness of life, comes from clinging. It's the first and second noble truth. So where is the clinging? That's the curiosity. That's the curiosity. That's what we want to find out. Why is it that I'm suffering? What am I doing? There's some really big things that generally cause all of us to suffer as humans. The big ones are, his experience was sickness, old age, death, right? We all are going to experience this. Well, if we're lucky, old age, but at least death, and most of us will have some sickness, unless it's an accident that takes us. So how can we experience that in a way that is liberating rather than enslaving? And so it's not going to be by running away from those things, because that doesn't work. I mean, you have to come to this conclusion in your own heart. You can listen to it, okay, that makes sense, running away doesn't work. But you have to see the mind doing it. This goes back to the practice. You have to see how, when I distract myself, the suffering is still there. I'm just, maybe I'm not feeling it enough. But what happens when you stuff negative feelings? What happens when you ignore negative feelings? They don't go away. They'll come back eventually. And they can also cause illness. I mean, this is understood more and more in the Western paradigm that stress is a big factor in lots and lots of chronic illness. And what is stress? Stress is not enjoying my life. I'm suffering here. So yeah, thanks. I think it's really important to remember that the solution to our suffering is within the suffering. It's not outside. It's not going away. It's not like we're trying to attain a certain samadhi, a certain meditative equipoise, and then just hold that as a static state. That's not the point. Many actual spiritual practitioners have done that, and that is a special kind of trap that we can fall into as practitioners. But that's not the point. And most of us are living in the world here, and so we have lots and lots of opportunities to see our own suffering. We're not in a cave where, it's just when the rice shipment is like 2 weeks late and you start worrying if you're going to be able to eat, that's the only time you suffer. It's all the time for us. It's all the time. So our challenge is really about finding enough space to watch the mind, to begin to make that a habit, and then it can be carried into the daily life. Yeah, sure.
So would you talk a bit about other kinds of meditation, like walking meditation, or doing the dishes meditation, or There are
Well-
other ways of being aware and present
Yeah.
when you're not sitting, because sometimes, no matter what Todd says, I am not going to sit.
So I think there's sort of like a basic level of mindfulness that you need to attain. If you come in and you come to a talk like this and you hear, oh, I don't need to sit down and meditate, I can just do it while I'm doing the dishes and so forth. If you're a very advanced soul, maybe that's fine. But most of us need to have that basic training. Now, I know you've been meditating for years and years, so you have the basic training. And what is mindfulness really? Mindfulness is attending to what's happening now, what is arising now in this present moment. And not getting distracted by a chain of thought that carries me away. Or if I get distracted, then recognizing that I'm distracted. If my experience of doing Tai Chi, lots and lots of hours of Tai Chi, is that in movement, we have an opportunity to be really attentive to change. And through being attentive to change, let's say, I think it applies just equally well to walking or doing the dishes, within that change, there's something that isn't changing. There's a sort of a stillness behind the change. If we're really attentive to the whole situation, kind of a global attention. And this is kind of an application of choiceless awareness. So we're going from basically a concentration practice of watching our breath, seeing when we're distracted, coming back to our breath. Then in choiceless awareness, we open to the 6 sense fields. So that's the 5 senses and thought. Any kind of mental event, imagery, hypnagogic. Sometimes people see colors on the floor when they're meditating. All of that is mental. And so once we have the ability to sort of stabilize in the 6 senses, anything we do can become practice. I remember going on a retreat on Cloud Mountain. I'd always try to get lunch dishes to be my chore because I had enough energy. It was right after lunch. It was a big chore, so I felt like I was at least contributing at least 45 minutes of my time. And it's great meditation when you're out there on retreat to just have to scrub all. I mean, they had a lot. It was a kind of industrial kitchen, so there's a lot of big platters and lots of plates, and it's very good meditation. But you have to come with a foundation. If you just come lost in thought, then it's just more distraction. Yeah.
I just wanted to share one thing that helped me a lot when I was just new to this was, and I was like continuously drawn to, this is gonna make me happy, that's gonna make me happy, I need that to go away, this continuous, and I don't know where this question came from, but it was like, does that have anything to do with real happiness?
Mm-hmm.
And I would just ask myself that over and over, and I'd be like, no, that's not, And I would just and then I could come back, and then it's like those things became less and less interesting, and I spontaneously became just fundamentally what I actually really wanted to do and felt inspired to do was practice and sit in silence and be aware.
Yeah, that's a good question. Does this have anything to do with real happiness?
Matt?
Yeah.
Another way that I find helpful is to use Joel's 3-second meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Relax the body, focus the mind, surrender all effort.
Relax so it's three-step meditation or something? Whatever. 3-breath meditation, that's right. So there's 3 breaths. So the first breath is relax the body. What was the second one?
Focus the mind.
That's right. Second breath, focus the mind. So that's attention. And then the third breath is surrender all effort.
And you can do that anywhere.
You can do that, yeah, you can do that anywhere.
So it kind of sets the stage.
Yes. Yeah, it's like a reset. If you're lost in thought, lost in a story, lost in suffering, that practice could be really useful just to kind of, but again, these are practices, and that means what we do is we practice them. They might not work the first time or the first 100 times. It might feel like, oh gosh, every time I sit down, I'm just full of thoughts. And that's normal. in the beginning stages. That's actually really normal and really a good thing to notice. Because how long has it been that you didn't notice how much thought you had? You just thought you were just going along and you're in control, right? I'm doing my life. And then you go to sit down and you realize that the mind is going crazy all the time. It's always got a million things to say. And many of them are not helpful. I mean, many people walk around with self-critical thoughts all the time. You're such a, POS, you've never done anything right, da, 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 da. Or, maybe people walk around with, yeah, you deserve this. You should take advantage of this situation. You know what I mean? So this is the mind is running the show, and it's not working in the sense that it's not getting us to real happiness. So we have to practice. And recognizing how powerful the mind is really the first step. Yes, sir.
So what do you think of like self-inquiry here? You notice you're all riled up about something, you decide to do the dishes and take that as an opportunity to see what is coming up. What is perhaps the need for it?
The need for?
Well, let's say I'm feeling, my mother-in-law said something about me and boom. So what is the need that's stimulating all of this?
Yeah.
To be accepted, like to, anyways, you start to look at
Yes.
these things. I don't know, I guess I think of it as just try to have a couple of different ways to look at your current state.
Yeah.
Not fighting it, just
Yeah.
doing what's it saying, where is it coming from?
Yeah, so like I said, inquiry is one of the four main pillars. To me, they all go together, or the four main practices. And, inquiry really begins with just that curiosity. Well, not, I have a right to be angry, that's why I'm angry. I mean, that's not inquiry. This is where I'm putting my feet and I'm not going to move, right? It's like you have a choice. You can either be right or you can be happy, And somewhere along the line, we have to decide, well, being right's never really worked. And so then, well, what is it that I'm, what's really deeper here? What's going on? And so that whole reflective self-looking, that's the foundation of the path. We all, you can come to a group like this and get some ideas, but everybody gets free on their own. There's nothing, I can't wave a magic wand and, take away all your karma. I've tried with Hiromi, it doesn't work.
Yeah, I really feel that to be true, that we do all, we're all born in this world alone, we all die alone, we all meditate alone, etc. But the Buddha told us to take refuge in the Triple Gem, which is the foundation, which is the Buddha, who is the enlightened one, the Dhamma, which is the truth, and the Sangha, which is his fruit. And that's how I get on the cushion.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The Sangha is a very important. And it's not that, this, from the perspective of delusion, being alone is kind of what we're trying to avoid, right? It's the existential loneliness and longing that comes from that first distinction, that I feel separate, there's an alien world, and I can be destroyed. It's a very primal kind of feeling. It's usually subconscious or unconscious, but every once in a while it boils to the surface. But it drives every deluded activity. Everything that we do to try to get happy is a reaction to that first fundamental distinction, which is a delusion. It's not true. From the perspective of the ego, though, going back to that place of unity feels like going back into the abyss, which is destruction. And so it's a very persistent delusion because of that. And in order to go back to this primordial oneness, we have to face that existential fear. We have to actually die. So that, is a big a big job. It's not easy. And so having friends that are along the path also, it makes it a little more, enjoyable. And you can kind of, compare notes. But then also, from the perspective of the truth, there isn't anything called loneliness, because there isn't anyone separate there to be alone. And so the whole show that is driven by loneliness is like a dream. It's not real. And so from that perspective, the Sangha is myself. It's all myself. So. But yes, I agree, the Sangha and in Buddhism, we draw a lot from the Buddhist teachings, but we also draw from the other mystics, the Hindus, the Christians, the Sufis here. We're ecumenical, we're not specifically affiliated with any one tradition. I personally have studied a lot of Buddhism. But I think that a lot of Buddhism can be universalized. So this idea of the triple gem, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the Buddha is just the principle that your birthright is awakening. Your birthright is freedom. Everybody has that. The Dharma is the teachings that help you get there, and the truth itself, the reality. And then the Sangha is, this miracle that we have other beings with us. It's really it's amazing. The world is a magical display, but it's profound.
Talk a little bit about energy and losing yourself, because like when I meditate, I seem like I go into kind of an energy, and that makes me conscious of what's happening, which is, I gotta have more energy, but I don't know how that relates to my meditation of losing myself. Maybe I don't have to know. Maybe that's the point. But
so I'm just trying to understand a little more clearly what you're saying. When you meditate, you feel energy, and then?
Well, my mind starts going, I guess, sometimes, and it seems like, is this good or is it good? Do I ignore it or do I?
So what do we do with judging thoughts?
Try to let them go.
Well, yeah. That's a really good question. And this is what the mind will do. The mind is judging good, bad, and indifferent. Indifferent means I don't need to worry about that, right? Good is I like it, I want it. Bad is I want to get away from it. And the mind does that. It's its job. Obviously it's useful. We don't want to stop the mind from doing that. Then you'll walk out into traffic, I don't know, is this bad? Right? It's not that we want to get rid of that, but we want to recognize that's what's happening. When we're meditating, it's time to put the mind on the shelf. Don't need it. I'm sitting down, everything's safe, there's no fire, there's... Here. Yeah, right. If you're in Napa, you're not going to be sitting down and meditating in your meditating room, in your fancy country villa. You're going to be running or hiding. Did you see the one about the couple that hid in the swimming pool? Yeah. Oh my God. Anyway, so notice those judging thoughts. Meditation, you can have all sorts of experiences. And some experiences are good signs. Yeah, that meditation is going well. Some experiences are maybe not so good. Maybe they're just, not necessarily signs of the practice working. They can be signs of practice not working. But in any case, the point is to keep going forward. Notice it, let it go. Keep the practice going. Some people experience lots of body energy. I'm kind of more like that. Some people really experience mostly the thought realm, and so they're much more oriented that way. Some people are very emotional, like the devotional type of people that, they're not that interested in inquiry and philosophy. That doesn't really do it for them. They're like, yeah, okay, whatever, but I want to go love God, and I want to feel that ecstasy of the divine. And they're, very emotional. So I've worked with students that are like that. Everybody's different. But the practice is about training attention. So if something comes up that distracts that attention, go back to your practice. That's the bottom line. The gentleman in the back.
Yeah, to just kind of continue with this, I still struggle immensely with food, and looking at this immense universe that is a display of creation and destruction, and waking up to truth, and then still seeking out sugar or protein from fish. Can you comment on that?
Well, I'd say if there's struggling, then there's something to be seen. And everybody's going to be different. Some people it's going to be food, some people it's going to be sex, some people it's going to be money, some people it's going to be relationships, maybe it's all of them for some people. But you know, when our practice is more mature, then our attention has to become subtler. And the closer we're getting to complete surrender, the more it's going to be in a way, you know, it's like we want to, we've done all these practices and we've had some aspect of volition behind them. We find out about the truth. You know, oh, I want that. I want to, you know, go that direction. I start reading, I start studying, I start doing practices. I'm doing these things. And even to where we see this separate sense is a fabrication, there's still this sort of sense that I'm seeing this. This is a my attainment. And that has to fall away. You know, it's a mystery. It has to do with the sense of being a doer. And the reality is you're not. Doing happens. But it's...
I guess to refine my difficulty is like, you know, take the Sermon on the Mount, for example, that Christ basically said, you're it, and don't worry about the world, you know, and I struggle immensely in Buddhism, especially the Theravada tradition, of keeping morality up.
Yeah.
And there's no way of not killing, and also judging whether animals or plants are sentient or not.
Yes.
And I've never found a clear answer from anyone.
Okay.
And
so you're talking about the morality of taking flesh versus vegetarianism? Is that what you...
strictly speaking,
Yeah.
To continue this corporeal structure,
Right.
I have to kill.
Yeah, this is true. This is what Joel says, and I'm going to pass on his, you know, that's all we do here really is pass on the teachings, right? The law of life is the law of sacrifice, and all beings are sacrificed. And so he wrote a little meal prayer that basically says, may I respect the sacrifice of these plants and animals that I might live, and in return I vow to sacrifice my mind to truth, my heart to love, you know, so forth.
So you're respecting the cycle, whereas in Theravada tradition especially, we're trying to get out of it at any cost.
Yeah. Well, see, teachings are stage specific, you know. Out of India, there came a very strong culture of nonviolence, which is beautiful. It's very respectable. But let's just, you know, look at the history. There have been many mystics, awakened mystics, who took flesh, and many who drank alcohol.
There's also many that walked right into the Ganges.
And then there's some that when they attained liberation, they dropped the body completely, yeah. So therefore, you know, just logically speaking, we have to argue that it must not be an actual requirement. I think it's probably a good idea. There are, I'm an acupuncturist, so there are some health issues that arise when people become vegetarians. And they can be moderated, but it depends on your constitution. Some people just don't do well. So then you're stuck with the question, well, should I nourish the body or should, sometimes we have to do things that, the bottom line is there are a lot of choices that we have to make. But what is our motivation? What is the motivation? And the Theravada tradition would, I think, agree with the Mahayanists on this, that the motivation is compassion, right? So how can I be the most use to the most number of beings? If you feel that your path is to help others, share the Dharma, or maybe be of service in some way, if you're sick, you can't do that. So this is something, but we all have to come to this resolution in our own heart. It's not something that you can just be told. This is a good koan for you. It's a good practice. This is because it's right there with, well, what's my motivation? And what do my teachers tell me I should do? And so forth. So, but I eat meat. I have been vegetarian. My wife and my son do not do well with vegetarian diets. So if they did, maybe we would have a vegetarian house. I don't know, but we don't. Dr. Wolf, Joel's teacher, he ate meat, and he said the only truly guilt-free or karma-free food is fruit. He said fruit is nature's bribe. Right? And I think that's true, but becoming a fruit, and then of course you got the bugs inside the fruit, so you got to make sure you pick those out, right? I think fruitarianism isn't the healthiest diet though, so pancreatic cancer and all that, so anyway. Does that help?
No.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that coming from the West, somebody would look at me and say, well, you're suicidal. You want to end your life. But I look at them and I said, my life, I'm not separate.
Why would they say you're suicidal?
Well, I want out, I want liberation, right? But then I say, well, there's my ego coming in and saying, I want something to happen.
Yeah.
That's other than what's happening.
Right.
So that paradox is still very much there. And yeah, it's something I'll struggle with.
You'll struggle with it until the struggle eats you, yes. Yeah, some of these questions that we come to are questions that cannot be solved by the intellect. Ultimately, that's where we want to go with our practice, is to get to this point where it's like a paradox. So here I am. I recognize that there's nothing I can do to become happy. There's just nothing I can do. It's impossible. I want liberation. And the only way I'm going to get liberation is if I die, if I become completely surrendered. So here I am attempting to surrender myself, which is a paradox because that's me doing it. And so that, you come to, in Zen they say, there's some koans that have to do with this particular situation. You're standing on the top of a 100-foot pole. That's the koan. What's your next step? Or you're hanging from your teeth from a branch, and there's a tiger above you and a tiger below you. What do you do?
Well, is that cherry or strawberry next to it?
And then there's one where maybe that's how it goes. Yeah. Anyway. So maybe, go check out some of the koans. Zen Flesh, Zen Bones has a selection of the Mumun Kan, or you can get Thomas Cleary has a translation, the Gateless Gate. You'll see that this particular situation is well known, and it's a good place to be. And what you want to do is just not turn away from it and keep your attention steady on it.
Yeah, hence why I practice Vipassana. Ultimately, when when the mind does calm down, I see how this whole process is going.
Good.
Yeah, but tremendously painful.
Yes. Shh. So, somebody over here?
Well, as soon as he said what he did, it seemed like I didn't want to say what I was going to say, but I'll say it anyway.
Okay.
So you were right before that talking about vegetarian and I had this flash of something I needed to say that was like an analogy, so I'm just going to say it. But it was a decision I had to make, that I did make at some point when I began eating chicken. And bone broth, 24-hour bone broth, has basically saved my life. And I'm addicted to it now, and it's solved a whole bunch of problems no way medicine can solve, and has never. And I see it as an analogy of the same thing. I rescue animals, and there's always the problem of having to kill things that are endangering the other things. But I also rescue a lot of the things that my rescued animals kill.
Mm-hmm.
But I kill ticks and fleas. And I don't kill flies and spiders, and I'm an arachnophobiac. You know, I don't like spiders, but I save them. I don't kill black widows anymore, but I make them go away somewhere. And I try to make things stay away from where we are as far as the ticks and fleas. But if all else fails, I just have to kill them because they make the animals extremely ill.
Yeah.
Plus us. So I just see that as somehow that seems the same in my mind of decisions, having to make decisions. I don't kill anything. I don't want to kill anything. And it actually makes me suffer. I don't know how to rectify this thing that I don't feel the same pain. I do often feel the same pain about the chicken broth, the bone broth.
Mm-hmm.
Often, even though, I mean, I know about blessing it and doing it, but I don't eat pigs and cows, and I don't eat dogs and cats, and I don't eat, and I used to be attached to chickens, so there's still a little pain left. So, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. You know, like I said, these are decisions we're faced with that there's no easy answer. And sometimes the only option we have is what is the path of least harm. Not that there is an option for the path of no harm. So it's part of, you know, these are the kinds of questions that we grapple with. And one of the things that you can do if this really draws your attention is to, as you're grappling with this question, turn the light of attention back on its source. Who is it that's asking this question? Who is it that's concerned about causing harm? Because there's no solution to suffering within cause and effect. All activity is bondage, ultimately. Anything that we do with the sense of I'm the doer, this is my volition. I'm the one that's saving the chickens. I'm the one that's killing the termites or whatever it is.
Well,
right?
well, how would I do that with the chickens that I need?
Well, I'm just suggesting that if you feel stuck in this quandary of I can't figure out this moral dilemma, use your attention that's become so strong on that moral dilemma and turn it back and do inquiry. That's just an option.
Would you give me the example in the case of the chicken?
Yeah, well,
which I bless while I'm drinking the broth.
So I feel bad.
Yes.
That's the thought that comes.
Right.
The next thought would be, who am I? You know, okay, I feel bad. Well, what? Okay, I feel bad. But who am I? And so then, because your attention's been captivated by this moral dilemma, there's a lot of energy there. There's a lot of presence and attention. So use that attention, instead of in this moral dilemma where I don't know what to do. You don't know what to do. Who are you? So it's just it's a way of taking a situation and maybe getting some benefit out of it when there's actually nothing you can do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Somebody in the back, yeah.
Because I think for me, some of this stuff, it feels like I have to go into the heart. to feel the suffering of whatever I've had to do. Like a rat came up to my toilet. It was scaring me a few years ago. It was running around my house. I couldn't sleep, I was terrified. And I called the plumbers and they did this thing so that no rats will ever come in from the sewer line. And I had to hire somebody to come and set a big giant trap, or a couple of them. And I had so much fear and panic. And for that 3 days in the winter, it was raining. And finally, when the people came to set the rat trap, I knew where the rat was, it was behind the stove. It eventually got caught. And I saw the rat, and it was like an adolescent rat. And it was really clean because it had been through the water. And it wasn't like a dirty rat.
So for a rat, it was cute. It was a cute rat.
But all I felt was compassion for that rat. And I thought, I'm so sorry that I had to kill you, but I couldn't live with the rat in the house. And my neighbor came, I called my neighbor at midnight because that's when the rat got caught, because they come out at night. And he came over and he buried the rat, and I prayed for that rat. And I just saw how vulnerable the rat was. And yet my fears were like, I have to barricade myself from this, this enemy, the rat. Anyway, so I guess for me it was just letting myself feel my broken heart about it. And see that the rat was just a being wanting to survive and going through my sewers because I had really great poop, I guess. And because I ate such good food.
See how it's all about you still.
But what I'm saying is that what the experience was able to be one of those moments where you realize that the rat, there was the story of how I had to barricade internally because of the fear and all that stuff that was suffering, and then just realizing that it had nothing to do with me, and all that stuff was just a lot of suffering. And of course we got to protect our own selves, and I was in fear for my own sanity, as I see someone might imagine if you are afraid. But I think it was the seeing the rat and the vulnerability, and it was just a being wanting to survive, that really shifted that. And it just kind of opened a little well in there. So that, and I think that's when people have to kill their own food, when you have to kill your own chicken, it's probably a little different than going to the store. And I'm a meat eater, and so I understand.
Right, so essentially, the way things are rigged, it forces you to become more conscious, because it's all suffering. So our awareness grows, and eventually, obviously we can't speak of it, but it's real, what's beyond is really real. The transcendental truth behind all beings, it's there. And thank you for this day, it's been lovely.
Good. So, just in response to Runabeth's comment about the compassion she felt for the rat. So, compassion is part of what helps to dismantle our separation. But compassion arises through the experience of suffering. It doesn't arise outside of the experience of suffering. And that it requires us to feel the grief, the sorrow, the world's sorrow. The statues of Guanyin, she has the chalice where she's pouring, this is like the tears of compassion. It's not that compassion in transcending suffering, it's not that we transcend compassion. In fact, compassion becomes the main motivating force. And so on the path, any opportunity we can have to cultivate that, it starts to dissolve that boundary, because we start to recognize this is a universal problem. Suffering is a universal problem. Rats have it. Humans have it. All beings have it. And so what is the root of it? And how can I be free of that so that I can be of benefit to the others that are still suffering. This is the Bodhisattva vow. This is that, but it's also what they call bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. The mind of enlightenment comes from this primary recognition that suffering is the universal law of all beings. So it's an opportunity, you know, when we start to recognize this, it's an opportunity to let ourselves feel that sorrow rather than avoid it. Because it will begin to melt your heart, it will begin to open your heart. Let's see. We've got time for one more. Or none. Yes, sir.
You started to do the meal prayer. Can you?
You know, that one I can give you Dr. Wolf's meal prayer, but I never memorized Joel's meal prayer.
I know
Is it
it.
written?
I know it.
Oh, she knows it, okay.
I did it for many years. It's acknowledging that sacrifice is the law of life. I give thanks for these plants and animals that gave their lives so that I might live. In return, I vow to sacrifice, as you said, my heart to love, my mind to truth, and my body to service.
Beautiful. Okay. So I think we'll end there. And I'll be hanging out for a little while if anybody wants to chat. We have tea. Until next time, peace to you all.